Good evening and welcome. You're watching the Newstrack. I'm Rahul Kanwal. On the show this evening, one of the world's leading risk analysts, Ian Bremmer, president of the Eurasia Group, will be joining me live from New York to talk about the assassination attempt on Donald Trump and what this means for the US elections, the world's most keenly observed electoral contest. Is it now more and more certain that Donald Trump will once again be the next president of the United States? We look at that in detail on the Newstrack this evening.
Donald J. Trump.
First appearance since shooting. Trump receives hero's welcome. Fist pumps and Republican roars. Will bullet plus bandage bring ballot boom for Trump? Is Trump triumph inevitable? Big focus on Newstrack.
With a bandaged ear and pumping his fist, Donald Trump made his first public appearance since the shooting at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Trump appeared visibly emotional. He wasn't scowling or smirking, but looked subdued. Trump has already said that he was saved by God alone. The assassination bid has increased Trump's lead over Biden in the polls by more than 4%. It seems increasingly certain that Donald Trump might be the next president of the US.
With a bandage on his right ear, Donald Trump made his first public appearance since being injured in an assassination attempt at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee.
Trump.
A visibly emotional Trump received a hero's welcome and a standing ovation as he walked out, pumping his fist, in reference to his reaction in the moments after he was wounded. As the crowd chanted, "Fight, fight, fight," and "We want Trump," the former US president mouthed the words, "Thank you." And settled into a box with some of his children and US Senator JD Vance, his choice for running mate, announced earlier in the day.
To elect Donald J. Trump as the next president of the United States.
On behalf of our entire family and on behalf of the 125 delegates in the unbelievable state of Florida, we hereby nominate every single one of them for the greatest president that's ever lived, and that's Donald J. Trump. Hereby declaring him the Republican nominee for President of the United States of America.
Trump is due to formally accept the Republican nomination in a primetime speech on July 18. A diverse set of RNC speakers made the case that Americans would be better off if they returned Donald Trump to the White House.
But one thing is clear. President Trump is a candidate who is not afraid of hearing from new, loud, and often critical voices. And I think we all can agree, whether people like him or they don't like him, in light of what happened to him on Saturday, he has proven to be one tough SOB.
My message to you tonight comes from a humble place. The left told me to hate Trump, and even worse, to hate the other side, the people who support him. When you cut through the lies, you realize the truth. American families were better when Donald Trump was president.
We're so relieved and we're thanking God that President Trump, survived the assassination. And I think if this is doing anything, it's really galvanizing everyone behind him. Not only people who've been supporters for a long time, but people who maybe were on the fence, I think are now coming to see what we've been saying all along, that he's just been so persecuted.
Tesla and SpaceX CEO Elon Musk, who had endorsed Trump after the shooting in Pennsylvania, has now reportedly pledged $45 million per month to bolster Trump's bid for re-election. After the assassination attempt, Trump is leading the polls, with the gap between him and Joe Biden growing to 4%. Can he carry on the momentum till November? Bureau Report, India Today.
Donald Trump has picked JD Vance as his running mate and vice presidential candidate. 39-year-old Vance is a first-time senator from Ohio and a critic-turned-admirer of Trump. He shot to fame as the author of Hillbilly Elegy, a memoir of a family and culture in crisis, which captured the plight of poor, white, working-class people in Middle America. He also has an India connection through his Indian origin wife, Usha Chilukuri Vance, who he met while studying at Yale University.
You have to start by dealing a humiliating rebuke to the radical left in this election. This is so important, this election. JD Vance.
Former President Donald Trump selected Ohio Senator JD Vance as his running mate for the 2024 presidential contest. The 39-year-old Ohio senator, a baptized Catholic, a U.S. Marine veteran, a Yale graduate in law and bestseller author, is all set to be the vice president for Donald Trump if he comes to power. Vance's selection injected new energy into a campaign that has centered in recent years on questions of age. Both presidential candidates, being 75 plus, a 40-under young Republican raised in a humble background in Ohio with a Hindu wife from Indian origin, was the right move for the Trump camp.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for us to determine our nominee for the office of Vice President of the United States, Senator JD Vance.
But in 2016, JD Vance did not support Donald Trump. The lawyer-turned-venture capitalist-turned-politician in 2016 did not vote for Trump and called him Hitler, and declared himself as a never-a-Trump guy. But then he changed course 2 years later, around the time he was baptized and became a Catholic. His 2016 bestseller memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, has often been described as a window into rural, oft-forgotten America that fueled Donald Trump's rise. It was adapted into a film directed by Ron Howard 4 years after it was first published.
Well, I'd say, first of all, it's not an unsurprising pick. Vance has been one of the top names that have been talked about for many weeks now. He's an interesting guy. He's a senator and recently been elected senator. And I think the thing that's critical for Vance, the thing that makes him attractive to Trump and to Republicans, is that he's got a real blue-collar background. Even though he is a Yale-trained lawyer, an Ivy League lawyer, he has maintained this kind of credibility and ties to that more rural parts of America.
JD Vance met Usha in his Yale days. That is when he grew close to another Yale graduate Republican of Indian origin, Vivek Ramaswamy. The three are close friends, and Vance credits his wife for inspiring him to find his true faith in Catholicism 4 years after his marriage. A litigator at a national firm, Usha Chilukuri is the daughter of Indian immigrants and has an impressive academic background. Together they have 3 children, and one of them is named Vivek, inspired by their friend Ramaswamy, who withdrew from presidential race in January endorsing Trump.
Our family story is an Ohio story. My husband JD grew up in Middletown, and things weren't easy. His mom struggled with addiction, and his dad wasn't there. But JD was lucky. He was raised by his loving grandmother, and he served his country as a Marine in Iraq. He's an incredible father, and he's my best friend. JD shared his family story in Hillbilly Elegy, and he wants for Ohio what Ohio gave him: a fighting chance.
I'm JD Vance, and I approve this message.
Well, I think his background is really compelling. The fact that, a hard pull up from your bootstraps kind of life, a mother who was addicted to drugs. He wrote about it, a book that really affected many people in the country of what was happening in Appalachia. I think also that he served his country. He, as a Marine, I think that's compelling as well. He had a short-term success in business. He's a lawyer. married to an Indian American, 3, children. He has built, a life, an American life that I think Donald Trump clearly respects.
JD Vance as the running mate is also likely to play out well in the Silicon Valley, where Trump is looking for financial backing for the campaign. The billionaire former CEO of PayPal, Peter Thiel, is one of Vance's biggest donors. And this selection also means that 2 white men will now lead the Republican ticket as Trump seeks to make inroads into other demographics, like the Asian Indian diaspora, where Usha plays a significant role. Bureau Report, India Today.
Donald Trump has become the 13th president or presidential candidate in the United States to face an assassination attempt and the 8th to survive. The biggest question in the United States, and a question that will determine global geopolitics, is what impact will this assassination attempt have on this crucial race to the White House? To talk about this rapidly unfolding situation, I'm joined live from New York by Ian Bremmer, president of the Eurasia Group. And I just want to tell our viewers why Ian's perspective is important, because this is his job. He looks at uncertainty, looks at how that uncertainty is likely to evolve and what impact this could have on the here and the now. And this is really a situation where nobody really knows what happens next. And his expertise is really to try and make sense probabilistically of what could happen. So Ian Bremmer, thank you very much for joining us on the Newstrack. Appreciate your time.
Sure.
I'm sorry about what's
happening
happening in the United States.
Thank you.
Didn't really imagine that something like this would happen in a country like the United States in a continuing fashion. I want to start this conversation, Ian, by asking you about the impact that you think this assassination attempt on Donald Trump is likely to have on the race for the 4th of November. Is it now increasingly certain that Donald Trump will most probably be your next president?
Absolutely. This is going to be a very close election. And as you know, most Americans have already made up their minds. A very polarized time. Trump and Biden both very unpopular, but also radically different kinds of candidates with different visions of America. And so it's not like a whole bunch of Biden supporters are suddenly going to go out and say, maybe I'll vote for Trump now because I'm so impressed with him. No, but the enthusiasm about Trump, the turnout for Trump among his supporters is going to be a lot higher as a consequence of this assassination attempt, and also Trump's incredibly strong response to it. Where for Biden, and as you know, there has been lots of grumbling inside the party that Biden is unfit, especially on the back of a disastrous debate performance only 2 weeks ago, feels like a lot longer now. 81 years old, very frail, clearly weakening over the last months and year for anyone that spent any time with him. Much less likely that he is going to be forced to step down out of the race because, of course, all of the attention is now, as you just asked me, about the assassination attempt and that implication. So for both of those reasons, it's much more likely that Trump is going to return as president of the United States.
You know, we had Ian Bremmer at one of our events in Mumbai a few weeks ago. This is before the Indian elections, and I asked him about the US elections and whether he was hedging that Donald Trump is likely to win. And he said there's 5 months to go and a lot can happen in 5 months. So just listen to this excerpt from our last conversation with Ian Bremmer, and then we'll talk about what more can happen from there. Here's Ian Bremmer from our event in Mumbai. The biggest political risk globally at this moment is the election in the United States. What's your reading? All the data trackers that we're seeing here seem to suggest that Donald Trump has a slender edge over Joe Biden. Does it seem to you probabilistically that Trump's coming back?
Yeah, but my level of confidence is near zero. I mean, first of all, the elections are 5 months away. I could tell you what's going to happen in Russian elections in 5 months, right? The United States is still a democracy. I mean, it's not a very well-run democracy. It's not a very representative democracy, but it is still a democracy. So I don't know. These men are very old. We have no idea if they're both going to be alive in 5 months, right? I mean, that's still an open question. First applause line for the crowd here. Very interesting. The Indians are clearly rooting for something major to happen in the United States. I'll tell you, we don't know. We don't know. But what we do know is that this election matters a lot. And it matters a lot for the future of U.S. democracy, and it matters a lot for foreign policy in an environment where there are major wars going on, major tensions going on. The future of the United States is far more uncertain on the back of this election than at any point in your and my lifetimes.
Mr. Bremmer, in that last conversation we had, when I pressed you about whether Donald Trump had an edge, whether he would keep increasing the lead over Joe Biden, you were hedging. You were saying that there's still a lot of time to go to November and a lot can happen. From where we've reached, given all the uncertainty at play, what are the other scenarios that you're looking at? What else could potentially happen in this hugely unpredictable race?
Well, as you'll remember, you and I were visiting together in Mumbai with a different race on our mind. It was the Indian election with the final results just about a week away. And at that point, I was saying that there are going to be surprises, and that anyone that thinks that this race is over is really kidding themselves. Now, since then, pretty much everything that could go wrong for Biden has gone wrong. As I said, this was probably the worst debate performance that I've seen in my lifetime in a U.S. presidential campaign. It wasn't that Trump won. It was that Biden lost. He was just unable to appear that he could run the country for another 4 years. And really, there's no one that supports Biden at this point that thinks that this man could be president and effective at 86 years of age, which is what he would be at the end of a second 4-year term. So there were enormous calls for him to leave. And then, of course, you had the shock of the first assassination attempt since 1981 against then-President Ronald Reagan, this close to killing Trump. And then you wouldn't be asking me if Trump is going to win. You'd be asking me who's going to take over the Republican nominee now that Trump is dead. That very easily could have happened. So, I mean, look, the fact that we have this kind of violence in the U.S. election, the fact that we have so much anger, so much disinformation, as I said, I believe that you can now make a much stronger bet that Trump is going to win than you could have when we saw each other a couple of months ago. But I also recognize something that we need to talk about, which is that there are a lot of democracies in the world today, yours in India, the European Union just had their elections, Indonesia this year, Mexico, all over the world, the United Kingdom. And yet the United States is the one major democracy that is truly in crisis, its political system. 75% of Americans say that they believe that democracy is at stake in this election in November. But as you know, they don't agree on why. They think it's the other side. The Trump supporters think it's Biden that's destroying democracy, that he's the one that is illegally trying to imprison their former president. He's the one whose rhetoric is responsible for the assassination attempt. They believe that. And the Democrats supporting Biden believe that Trump is a dictator who wants to end democracy in the U.S. So the stakes are incredibly high. Whoever wins the U.S. election, the opponents will not accept that as a legitimate outcome. This is really much more than whether or not Trump or Biden is president. It's much more about, do Americans believe in their system, and can the United States persist as a flawed but still representative democracy? I think those are the questions that Americans need to be asking right now. I can assure you that America's allies around the world are asking that question.
There is so much pressure from within the Democrats and even from well-wishers, funders, celebrities on Joe Biden to step aside, given his age. If everyone gets the fact that the president is not capable of serving another 4 years, why is it that the old man insists on hanging in there, and why can't others around him force him to step aside?
Well, first of all, before I answer that question, let's also recognize that an unprecedented number of Americans think that Trump is too old to run. I mean, if we took Biden out of the equation, there was a survey a week ago, again, before the assassination attempt, 50% of Americans responded, actually it was 49, I want to be accurate, 49% of Americans responded that Trump was mentally unfit to serve for another 4 years. If you took Biden out of the equation, that would be unprecedented. You'd say there's no way this guy should stand. 78 years old, frequently mixes up names, gets things wrong all the time. I mean, just at 4 more years of that, you wouldn't make him CEO of anything. So why is Trump standing? But of course, the Republican Party has fallen much more in line behind the individual of Trump. The Democrats are much more willing to express their anger, their dissatisfaction with their candidate. Now, that same survey I mentioned, 49% against Trump, 74% of Americans said that they believe that Biden was unfit to serve for another 4 years, physically and mentally. And again, that is absolutely unprecedented. But Biden has to be willing to step down, and he hasn't been. And the people that have been talking about it, it's not as if it's been a secret. I mean, every head of state and CEO I talked to that's been meeting with Biden over the last year and a half has spoken in various ways about how he has slowed down. In the last week in the NATO summit in the U.S., I had leaders telling me that the last time that he met with Biden, Biden didn't recognize him. This is someone that's met Biden dozens of times. Biden didn't recognize him. And that he's, he doesn't hear well, and that he sometimes, sort of zones out during a meeting. I mean, that's not okay to be president. But you're right. A lot of people have been working to try to convince Biden to step down. Certainly Obama and his advisors quietly. Nancy Pelosi, the former speaker, a little less quietly. George Clooney, but he came out because of a fundraiser in California, and everyone at that fundraiser knew that Biden was just not with it, but no one said anything except for the right wing, using it to weaponize the Trump election against Biden. And so the Democrats were defensive, and they circled the wagons, and they said, no, he's just fine. So I think a combination of loyalty to Biden, Biden's stubbornness, and also the fact that there's so much disinformation on both sides that gets weaponized in this deeply dysfunctional and very long election has made it possible for Biden to still stand in. I want to be clear. I think Biden is very likely to lose. I think if he were to stand aside, another candidate, most likely, almost certainly Kamala Harris, the vice president, because that's who everyone would get behind around Biden, would have a better chance of beating Donald Trump. Is that better chance 50%? No, not right now.
Now, Donald Trump has picked JD Vance, the Ohio senator, as his running mate and potential vice president. Of the options that were on his plate, what do you think JD Vance's selection suggests about the kind of presidency Donald Trump hopes to run?
Yeah, I'm not surprised about that. I was with our friend Fareed Zakaria over the weekend and said I thought Vance was going to get it. And I'll tell you why. Back when Trump was running for president the first time, he didn't think he was going to win. And he knew that he needed a vice president that was going to make him seem more acceptable to a larger number of voters. Someone he didn't necessarily like or respect that much, but nonetheless, he shored up the evangelicals. He was, sort of an adult. He was senior. He had gravitas. The Republican establishment liked him. And of course, I'm talking about Mike Pence. Now, if Biden were concerned that he needs to win, then you'd pick either a moderate businessman like Doug Burgum from North Dakota, Tim Scott from South Carolina, the outspoken senator who is generally liked by most of the Republican establishment. Or if you really want to win and don't mind that there's going to be disagreement at the top of the ticket, then you pick Nikki Haley, who would get lots of independents to turn out, would certainly increase the likelihood that Biden gets thumped in the election. But if you already think you're going to win and you want to go with the person who is most like you, who is most capable of driving your agenda, then you go with JD Vance. And Trump has confidence that he's going to win. 39-year-old guy who used to say that Trump was essentially like Satan. He once referred to Trump as America's Hitler, said he was cultural heroin for the American working class. He described himself as a never Trumper, said he was even thinking about holding his nose and voting for Hillary. This is JD Vance, right? This isn't a Democrat. And now he's on Trump's ticket. But the thing about JD, he's very capable. He's very smart. And he is also most willing to hitch his wagon effectively. He's incredibly politically ambitious. He doesn't have any ideological true north. He's very like Trump in that regard. He wants to win. And for Vance and for Trump, it's not about leading the country. It's about winners and losers. And that's the enemy side is your enemy. It's not about public service and bringing the country together. It's about winning at any cost. And it doesn't matter who gets in your way. You knock them down. And I think I mean, I know that Trump said that he was going to, after the assassination attempt, give a more unity speech. And I wouldn't be surprised if he does that. You'll remember his first State of the Union back in 2017 was also a unifying speech. It lasted for exactly as long as the teleprompter, and then he went back to Trump. I think that's what we're going to see here. This is going to be an incredibly divisive ticket. It is going to lean in to making America great again themes, MAGA themes, and America First themes. And it's going to be incredibly polarizing. I think that Vance does not get additional votes for Trump, but Trump doesn't think he needs them. What he gets is a much stronger capacity to run the country the way he wants to. And that's what I think.
So let's spend some time there, because you're saying it's now increasingly likely that Donald Trump will be president again. From the moves he's made in public and from all his statements, what's your best understanding of the kind of president he's likely to be in his second term? And I want you to explain this in the context of U.S. governance and policy in the first instance, and then we'll come to the rest of the world.
Okay, in terms of U.S. governance, I think that the markets, for example, like Trump the first time around, you'll remember they went up when he was elected. Why? Lower taxes, lots of deficit spending, less regulation, more support for CEOs, big industry, less focus on climate change, more focus on allowing American growth, also significant U.S. industrial policy. That is the orientation from a policy perspective. I do think that on the difference with a second Trump administration is that Trump feels much more vindictive this time around. He's been impeached twice, indicted dozens of times, convicted on 34 felonies, and now has faced an assassination attempt. And he blames the Democrats for all of that. He blames them personally. He thinks it's wrong. He thinks what they're doing is illegal. They're politicizing their power. He blames the left-wing media for that, who he refers to as enemies of the people. And I think one of the other things he will do in terms of governance will be to go after those people, to make them into priority enemies. And that means that he will try to politicize and weaponize the Department of Justice, the IRS, and the FBI. Which does potentially lead to a new McCarthyism in the United States, which also considerably strengthens the incumbent party. And this is where you get, Project 2025 that a lot of people have been talking about, and the desire to ensure that the bureaucracy in the U.S. government is politically loyal to Trump. So a big change, and those things will undermine rule of law in the United States.
Is there likely to be a stronger pushback toward Trump presidency in his second term? Because this time everyone knows that he can be around only for 4 more years. The first time around was all unpredictable, unexpected, and therefore no one had their instincts or thought through how to respond. Do you think there'll be a stronger pushback against any potential Trump excesses this time around?
Let's remember that a lot of the pushback came from inside the Trump administration. And so the question will be, will he allow the kind of professionals that don't agree with him and a lot of what he wants to do in the inner circle? I think it is less likely. I think he's learned more lessons over 4 years of governing. You've seen that in the campaign. He's running a much more disciplined campaign this time around than he did before. I suspect that will also play through in terms of governance. Now, more broadly, if Trump wins, it is quite likely that he's going to have a majority in the Senate. By the way, that would be true if Biden wins anyway, because the seats that are up in the Senate this time around, remember, it's only 1/3 of the seats every 2 years for 6-year terms. These seats are more vulnerable for the Democrats, so they likely have the Senate. They might get rid of the filibuster. You now have a Supreme Court that has just ruled that any official act by the U.S. president has impunity, according to the court, and he's likely to have the House. So, I mean, the ability for there to be checks and balances on power of Trump will be much more limited in 2025 than they were back in 2017.
What could a potential Trump presidency mean for India and for the rest of the world? How is Trump 2.0 likely to be different from the first version that we saw?
You may remember, you and I have spoken about this on a couple of occasions now. I think that India is one of the few countries in the world that is actually in a very good position with the United States, irrespective of who wins. I think that Modi has a strong relationship with Biden. He has a strong relationship with Trump. You'll remember the Howdy Modi rally in Texas that Trump attended with like 100,000 people. And Trump gets along with Modi quite well. He sees Modi as a strong leader. He's going to have 15 years now of, sort of unbroken, undiminished leadership. Didn't perform as well in the last elections, has to have a coalition. But from Trump's perspective, that doesn't matter one bit. So I don't see a big change in terms of India's direct bilateral relationship with the United States. But around the world is very different. The biggest thing I should mention is that Trump really focuses on tariffs as a tool of U.S. policy. He focuses on trade balances. He wants to have a 60% tariff on all Chinese exports to the United States and a 10% tariff on all goods coming into the U.S. from around the world. The Peterson Institute in Washington, D.C., nonpartisan economic group, has said that if that was implemented, it would have a 1.8% negative impact on American GDP in the first year. That's pretty significant. So, that would be the biggest near-term impact from foreign policy globally from Trump. Also, the person driving that policy is Robert Lighthizer, former U.S. trade rep under Trump in the first term. He's from Ohio. He's been a big supporter of JD Vance, who's also from Ohio. I think it's very likely that Lighthizer becomes Secretary of Treasury now, so that makes these policies more likely to be implemented. More broadly, Trump is a unilateralist. He's not isolationist, so he doesn't like the European Union because it's a multilateral grouping that he thinks can beat up on the United States, and they're stronger in numbers. He liked Brexit. He wants Frexit. He likes Orban from Hungary, likes the Eurosceptics, Le Pen from France. So that'll be a huge tension with European leaders. He also wants the Americans to end the war in Ukraine. JD Vance, as well, strongly opposes any further aid to Ukraine. The Republicans as a party want to keep that aid going. He wants a ceasefire. Certainly, he'll be more oriented to talk to Putin immediately once he wins the nomination.
So let me pause you for a second to spend a little bit more time on the Russia-Ukraine war. If Trump does what you're saying, which is to cut off funding, put pressure on NATO, not be as friendly with Zelensky and Ukraine, how could that impact the future of the Russia-Ukraine conflict?
Yeah, well, it's enormous impact in the sense that the United States is the biggest military supporter of Ukraine, even though all in the Europeans have spent more economically than the Americans have. And so, assuming that Trump wins and he says he wants to end the war, what he does is he tells Zelensky, I'm not going to give you any more support unless you're willing to freeze the conflict where it is, which means the land that Russia presently occupies, they continue to occupy it. You can't do anything about it. Zelensky's not going to support that, but Putin will. Putin will say, sure, I'll talk to you about that. And that puts Russia in a much better position. Now, the other thing about Trump is that unlike Biden, who has made sure that his policies have been aligned with American allies on Russia every step of the way, Trump does not care. He's going to make these decisions himself, and he'll let the Europeans read about it in the New York Times. Or the Wall Street Journal. So the potential that the Europeans get misaligned from the United States on an issue that they consider to be existential, I think is very high.
The other big trend that's playing out is the growing geopolitical divide between China and the United States. Joe Biden has largely taken forward the policies of Donald Trump. But if Trump comes back a second time, do you think the division of the world into two blocks and the trend towards a Cold War 2.0, does that exacerbate? Is that likely? Or will Trump be transactional and business-like and find some way of ensuring the situation doesn't spiral out of control?
Well, I think we don't know, and we don't know for a couple reasons. I mean, as you know, the Chinese economy is not performing well right now, and that is a serious problem for them. And that has meant that they have tried to avoid unnecessarily escalating conflict with the U.S. over the last almost 1 year. Now, if Trump comes in and he says, I'm going to hit you with all of these really heavy tariffs, it's possible China throws that playbook out and says, okay, we're going to hit you back, and we don't care if it costs us because we have no choice, and we're going to work to split U.S. alliances because we know a lot of allies don't like Trump, so maybe we can pick some countries off in Europe. Maybe we can pick some countries off in Asia. That's one possibility. Or it might be that the Chinese are so concerned about the impact that this hit will have on them that they say we need to cut a deal with Trump, and Trump is transactional. If he looks like he can get a great deal with the Chinese and look like a winner, he doesn't care that the Chinese are nominally ideological enemies of the United States. He'll say, I can work with them. I mean, for Trump, he truly doesn't care if you're a democracy and authoritarian state. If you've got money, you're going to write a check, you're going to make him look good. Just like when he was a real estate guy. He doesn't care who buys his property. If you've got more money, you're going to get it. You can be a criminal, doesn't matter. So, I mean, that is the way he thinks about the China relationship, and I think there's enormous uncertainty. It's kind of funny because China is the one policy where Trump and Biden have implemented basically the same sort of framework over the last 8 years, but the outcomes of a Trump administration on China could be very, very different.
Lastly, when we spoke last, you said that there are 5 months to go. A lot can happen. Now there are about 3.5 months to go before the elections. It's the most important election in the world, make no mistake. What are the scenarios that you evaluate? What else could still potentially happen, go wrong, go right in either direction? What are the big risk factors that you're looking at this moment?
Look, the Germans had just foiled a plot with the United States for Russia to try to kill the CEO of the leading defense company there. I mean, the potential that this proxy war that the West, NATO, is fighting, supporting Ukraine after the Russian invasion, could get a lot worse. I mean, you could have a Cuban Missile Crisis before November. It's not likely, but it wasn't likely that there was going to be an assassination attempt against Trump. Not because there aren't wackos with guns in the U.S. There are lots of them, but because the Secret Service should have gotten that guy. Like, he was an amateur, but they failed, right? I mean, I could see North Korea that is, deciding that they want to test the nuke, or maybe they, send some missiles into South Korean airspace, and God forbid, maybe there's an incident, maybe someone gets killed. That's a possibility. I mean, I think that there are enormous look, Biden could die. I mean, he's 81 years old. He could have a massive health incident at the last moment, and he could have a serious heart attack. Who knows? And someone has to replace him, even after the convention. You're right. I mean, this is the fact that the American election takes almost 2 years and costs billions of dollars, it's a tragedy. It's not the way an election should be run. France, the UK, they just showed the world how you do elections. Short, sweet, everybody respects the other side. Once it's over, you go back to work. That's not where the United States is.
Oh, makes sense. This really is a very complex time for the United States, and I see you're grappling with this at various levels as a citizen, as a voter yourself, and also as a risk analyst in terms of what this means for you, institutionally, individually, and for your country. Ian Bremmer, for taking out time and joining us, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
The assassination attempt on Donald Trump has also put the spotlight on the AR-15 rifle. It was this weapon that was used by Thomas Matthew Crooks to target Trump. When it comes to America's gun culture, no weapon has become quite as ubiquitous and controversial as the AR-15. Here's more.
Take a look at what happened.
5 bullets rang through Donald Trump's Pennsylvania rally on Sunday. Of the 5 shots, 1 hit the upper part of the former president's right ear. According to the Secret Service, Thomas Matthew Crooks from Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, used an AR-15 style rifle to attack Trump. When it comes to America's vast gun culture, no weapon has become as ubiquitous and controversial as the AR-15. Billed as America's rifle by the National Rifle Association and vilified as the weapon of choice for mass shooters. The rifle has been embedded in American pop culture as a sign of power, masculinity, and heritage. It's featured in most popular video games like PUBG, GTA 3, GTA Vice City, COD Black Ops, COD Warzone, and others, making it part of pop culture. Ironically, a stringent advocate of gun rights, Donald Trump vowed to reverse all gun restrictions imposed by President Biden upon his re-election earlier this year. Recognizing the 45th president's support to firearms, Car Group and Auto Ordnance manufactured the Trump series, an engraved Commander-in-Chief custom AR-15 rifle to honor his motto. In 2020, Trump's eldest son, Donald Trump Jr., posted a photo on Instagram flaunting an AR-15 style rifle bearing medieval symbols and a cartoon of Hillary Clinton behind bars. For Trump, the great irony is a 20-year-old registered Republican seeking to kill the pro-gun presidential candidate. Bureau Report, India Today.
There's no end to the terror surge in Jammu. 4 army men were killed in action during the Doda encounter. This is the 5th terror attack in the Jammu region in a month. What's driving this major surge in terror? And more importantly, what does India need to do to hit back?
Captain Brijesh Thapa killed in action in the Doda encounter. Sepoy Bijendra killed in action in the Doda encounter. Sepoy Ajay killed in action in the Doda encounter. Nayak D. Rajesh killed in action in the Doda encounter. Yet another terror attack in Jammu division where 4 army braves lost their lives. The encounter took place when the troops of the 10 Rashtriya Rifles and the Special Operations Group of the J&K Police launched a joint cordon and search operation 55 kilometers from Doda town in the Desa forest belt.
This entire stretch is surrounded by dense forests, mountains, so it becomes very difficult for security forces to carry out counter-terror operation in areas like these. Unfortunately, on most occasions in the recent past, the Pakistani terrorists who have carried out these dastardly terror attacks have managed to escape from the terror attack spots. That is why this time around, the security forces want to ensure that these coward Pakistani terrorists don't escape and they are neutralized as soon as possible.
Among the 4 army men killed in action was an officer, just 27 years old, who led his brave troops in chasing the fleeing terrorists in the challenging, thickly forested terrain. Captain Brijesh Thapa joined the army just 5 years ago. His shattered, grieving parents remembered their brave son and expressed today how proud they are of him.
गर्व तो अभी हो गया ही क्योंकि नेचुरली उसने अपने देश के लिए अपने जान दे रखा है ना, तो हो गए. बट हमारा तो काफ़ी बड़ा लॉस भी हो गया वो, तो वो हमको अभी टाइम लगेगा थोड़ा सा अंडरस्टैंड करना. अभी भी हमको ऐसे ही लग रहा है कि पता नहीं अभी क्या हो रहा है वो,
क्योंकि उसका इंटरेस्ट छोटे से फौज में और देश के लिए लड़ना था, तो उन्होंने अपना कभी वो ऐसे डरे नहीं, कभी वो झुके नहीं और हमेशा जो है वो जो भी काम था वो अपना ठीक-ठाक करता था और जो भी बोला वो सही करता था.
Officials said the gun battle began after a cordon and search operation was launched in the Desa forest area around 7:45 p.m. on Monday.
Based on that specific input, a massive anti-terror operation was launched by the security forces. Indian Army and Special Operations Group of Jammu and Kashmir Police worked together, and this counter-terror operation was launched at about 7 p.m. last evening. At about 9 p.m., the security forces were successful in establishing a contact with the terrorists who were hiding in the upper reaches. Unfortunately, in the gunfight, 4 of our brave hearts sustained serious injuries, and in the morning we got this tragic news, we got this unfortunate news that all 4 of them attained Veer Gati. They made the supreme sacrifice of their lives for the nation.
Amidst the spate of terror attacks in Jammu and Kashmir's top cop, the DGP, blamed regional parties for helping Pakistan's sinister terror agenda.
Pakistan successfully came to infiltrate all important aspects of our civil society. Thanks to the regional so-called mainstream politics in the valley, there is overwhelming evidence to show that many had honed the art of running with the hare and hunting with the hound to a near science that left both the common men and the security men bewildered, frightened and confused.
Former J&K Chief Minister Mehbooba Mufti has demanded the DGP's resignation, terming him a political tool.
By now, the head should have rolled. The DG should have been sacked by now. Because जो इस वक्त हो रहा है पिछले 32 months में almost 50 soldiers have lost their lives. Nobody is being held accountable.
In the last month, Jammu alone has witnessed 5 terror attacks with Jawans dying in the line of action. In 2024 alone, 27 terrorists and 15 security personnel have been killed in action. With Sunilji Bhatt in Doda, Jammu and Kashmir, Bureau Report, India Today.
It's a big India Today impact. IAS officer Pooja Khedkar's probation has been cancelled and she's been summoned by the IAS Academy in Mussoorie. The action against Pooja comes after India Today exposed how she had submitted fake disability and OBC non-creamy layer certificates to the UPSC.
IAS probationer Pooja Khedkar is shunted out of Maharashtra. The state government has relieved Khedkar of all duties. Her IAS training stands cancelled. Pooja Khedkar will have to report back to the Mussoorie IAS Academy by July 23rd. The crackdown comes even as more skeletons tumble out in the case. The public servant is allegedly at the centre of an elaborate scam involving forged medical records, multiple name changes and age manipulation. Using multiple addresses to prove her alleged disability, Pooja Khedkar first obtained a visually impaired certificate in 2019 from an Ahmednagar hospital. In 2021, she obtained a mental illness certificate from the same hospital, while she got a locomotor disability certificate from Yashwantrao Chauhan Memorial Hospital in Pimpri. She later approached the government hospital in Ond to get a certificate for more disabilities, but this time her application was rejected. However, the 2007 medical certificate submitted for her MBBS admission shows no mention of any disability.
जो मेडिकल सर्टिफिकेट दिया है उसमें एग्जैक्टली जिक्र क्या है?
That she is fit physically and mentally to undergo MBBS course ऐसा है, and absence of disabilities लिखा है उसमें.
Absence of disabilities. So in 2007, while she was taking admission here, she had no disabilities.
She was fit physically and mentally.
2 separate orders by the Central Administrative Tribunal on Pooja's petitions are showing several mismatches. The CAT order in 2020 mentions Pooja's age as 30, while another order in 2023 gives the age as 31, an addition of just 1 year in a gap of 3 years. Further, in 2020, she used the name Dr. Khedkar Pooja Dilip Rao in her application, while in the application 3 years later, her name became Miss Pooja Manorama Dilip Khedkar.
Finally, we can say probe has been initiated. The actions have been initiated on the different levels. Police are looking after Manorama Khedkar and Dilip Khedkar, parents of Pooja Khedkar. But yes, at least till now, service and the probation period of Pooja Khedkar with the state government of Maharashtra has been put on hold.
Despite these damning allegations, Pooja Khedkar maintains her innocence. She calls the charges against her a media trial.
मिसइन्फॉर्मेशन स्प्रेड केली जाते आणि प्लीज हे माझं खूप जास्त डिफेमेशन होत चाललेलं आहे. माझं प्लीज रिक्वेस्ट आहे मीडियाला सुद्धा की प्लीज एक रिस्पॉन्सिबल मीडिया म्हणून तुम्ही बिहेव करा. जेव्हा असं असताना माझी मीडियाला पण रिक्वेस्ट आहे की प्लीज तुम्हाला जी काही इन्फॉर्मेशन मिळेल ती तुम्ही प्लीज मिसइन्फॉर्मेशन म्हणून स्प्रेड करू नका.
As the case unfolds, the authorities are under pressure to get to the bottom of Pooja Khedkar's alleged fraud. With Omkar Wable, Bureau Report, India Today.
This is where I wrap up the Newstrack tonight. For your time and your trust, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you at 8 p.m. tomorrow evening. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye, good night.